Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert in the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so pleased to be welcoming Jeff to the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Leah. You know me, I'm always excited about a conversation like this.
Oh, you guys are going to love this today. You won't want to miss this. If we haven't met before, my name is Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I help protect people from the pain of damaged relationships. If you want to know more about that, I would love to connect, so please reach out. But today, you are not just here for me, you are here to soak in Jeff's wisdom. And like I said, you guys are going to love this. We have great conversations. And so if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to add those. Even if you're watching this and we're not live anymore, if you put those questions in, we can make sure to get back to you with some answers. So, to start off, Jeff, I always love asking people about how you got here. How did you become a snow globe shaker?
Um, well, I became no one's ever asked me that way. That's funny. I'm pretty sure I became a snow globe shaker because my whole life I've been getting shaken up inside the snow globe and didn't realize it. And I now realize in retrospect, I had a bit of an awakening, perhaps a huge awakening, and realized that the problem was I wasn't shaking my own snow globe. I was being thrown around in the world's snow globe, very much a victim mentality, which I don't like admitting, but I now see that's exactly what it was. And so once I realized that, I said, well, this doesn't make sense. Why am I letting the world shake me up? Why don't I shake it up? And that became, well, if I want to shake the world up, I've got to shake myself up first and then start with, people around me, whether they be clients, friends, or strangers who are willing to take that journey. And yeah, snow globe shaking is about shaking things up and taking control of the shaking. So I guess it's because I've been slammed against the walls a lot of my life and finally said, this doesn't seem like a good plan. Let's try something different.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love the metaphor, first of all. And especially with what you're talking about now, I know this is a more recent topic you've been talking about. And with the current last couple of years of the world, I suspect a lot of people could probably empathize with this feeling victim and shaken by pieces that are out of their control.
What's interesting, you bring up these times in the last couple of years because this idea, this metaphor hit me about 5 years ago. I was speaking on a stage, and I remember it vividly, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm sure you've done this as well, Leah. I had never thought about snow globes. I don't even know if I owned one, and it was not in my prepared speech. And I got this download about snow globes on stage, and I just started sharing it. I had no idea what was coming next. I was like this, almost like a puppet, or what's the dude on the chair, whatever, the ventriloquist. And all this stuff came pouring out that's virtually not changed in the last 5 years about the need to shake things up and how easy it is to settle because we shake it up. And the snow globe is magical because of the shaking. Otherwise, it's just a piece of art, but it doesn't get shaken because things are perceived to be good enough. And if you stop shaking, in fact, that first day it was so amazing. I said to the audience, and what happens when you stop shaking it? And they screamed out, it settles. I went, oh my God, that's awesome. That's true. I didn't know what the answer was. And it was so perfect. And what happened though the last couple of years is I've been talking about this, whether it's shaking up your snow globe personally, professionally, in your leadership as part of a team, organizationally, whatever it is. And I started getting a lot of pushback about 18 months ago and beyond, where people said, well, I like your idea, but frankly, I'm feeling shaking enough already. I don't need any more shaking. And I said, that's where you're wrong. Because when we're being shaken externally, that's when we need to do the most internal shaking. And the visual I added is if you imagine a giant snow globe and you're standing inside it and it's being vigorously shaken, and your strategy is to hold fast, well, you're going to get slammed against the wall. What you have to do is you have to keep moving to minimize the external. And so my message has been the last 2+ years, when you're getting great external disruption, it requires even more internal disruption and even more internal honesty about what you control and what you don't. And what you control is very limited, and you see it in the mirror every day. It's called you.
Yeah.
And other than that, I don't control anything. And I decided, frankly, to empower my life by focusing on me, which isn't selfish. It's just reality that I'm the only one that controls what's happening out here. And I don't try and control it. I control what's going on in here, whether it's my reactions, my perspectives. You know, your second layer of your 3 points is about reality. I love that because I believe that perception is the only reality. And you know, I think it was so many people said it, but I think the person I remember most was Wayne Dyer said something like, when you change how you see things, the world changes in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's just true. It, it's so true, and I'm sure that'll lead to other discussions. But yeah,
Yeah, well, you've completely touched on the point of this show, right? Is that your mind, whatever it is, your perception determines what the world is to you. If it's a good place, if it's a bad place, if you're a victim, if you have that sense of personal power that you can influence the snow globe yourself and move alongside of it. So just I completely agree with that. And I really love that you talked about that. I think it's a fine balance because there is something to be said for the stability, those little structures in the snow globe that you see, the little art pieces, and what do you keep that is maybe your foundational pieces, your foundational values, and then what can you shift? What can you shake up and move to adapt to all the shaking that's happening around you?
well, that's so important. It's interesting you talked about that, the whatever the centerpiece is, because the common theme in a snow globe is they're all something that for whatever reason we want to look at. It's worthy of looking
Yeah.
at. You don't see a lot of snow globes that you go, I never want to see that visual again. The problem is, and this is where the metaphor has to get a little creative, with a snow globe, the inside never changes.
Yeah.
The flakes land in different places, but it's no different because we didn't fundamentally change anything. And what we didn't change, and this brings it into the life and leadership metaphor, we need to change our thinking, we need to change our perspective, and most likely we need to change our actions. And those are the things we change. So yes, we want to figure out the foundations that are not going to change because they're who we choose to be. They're probably values based, but we need to change things because organizationally, you know, one of the challenges people have is they shake things up all the time, but nothing changed because all they did was disrupt. And that's just mean. I mean, to just create disruption for the now, I do that sometimes. By the way, I'm guilty of it. I can overshake sometimes, but I think you know the thing I've learned in this, and I love that we're talking about victimhood because victimhood to me, I'm discovering, is one of the most insidious mindsets, and it's sneaky because most people don't believe they're victims. Like if I looked at someone and said, "You're a victim," well, first of all, that's an unfair label. What I'd say is you're in victimhood right now. And but people think being a victim is just complaining all the time, whining. But to me, victimhood is this simple. Whenever I'm talking about something outside my control as the problem, and I'm unwilling to do something about it, I'm in victimhood. So if I'm talking about, I can't believe that happened to me, I can't believe this is going on, that's victimhood. It just is because it's not about something I control. But when I get back to, so what do I control here? And what I always control is my perspective and my mindset. It may be difficult, but I never can. Here's the thing: I never control out there. I can influence it, but I always have the opportunity to to control my thinking, my perspective, my mindsets, and even to the point. And this is where I love these discussions. Someone 2 years ago or so said to me, "Well, Jeff, some things don't change based on your perspective." I go, "Like what?" And their example, it was so cool. They said, "Well, a tree. You don't change your perspective and it stops being a tree. I said, well, but that's the super high level. I said, some people look at the tree and see it as a thing of beauty. Some people look at a tree and see it as a resource. Some people look at it as a tree and say, this is something that will protect me from the elements. This is something I can build a house with. This is something that does this. So I said, we all have perspectives of what that tree is. So yeah, it's a tree, but how we see it is very different. So we have huge opportunities to see things differently, no matter how much someone wants to believe that they're somehow innate. They're a thing that doesn't change.
I mean, I love this on so many levels. I completely agree with you about the victimhood and the challenges it presents, especially since they do have this. Well, it's just a tree. You can't change a tree. And really, what your definitions make me think of a lot, because we've also talked about this, is the idea of power. And my definition of personal power is the things that you can influence and change in your own world. And for some people, they feel that tossed about, I can't influence anything, everything is influencing me, and they're that tossed about snow globe, don't know what they're doing. And then when you can change your perspective like you're talking about, and instead see, well, no, I can influence and control my own thinking. And even on like a much bigger level, you can influence many parts of the world. You can't control them necessarily, can't make everything go exactly how you want, but you having that perspective does influence people. So it gives you this huge capacity in terms of how you're going to embrace things, in terms of how you're going to move forward.
Well, you and I, these people don't know, but you and I, when we met, we immediately bonded over Broadway. And, Broadway has so many deep lessons to teach us that I used to miss. And this topic that you're talking about right now is very prevalent in a fantastic show called Kinky Boots. Because at the end of that show, it's an amazing show, because at the end they tell you what they taught you. They actually come out and directly say, "We're going to tell you what the lessons we just taught you."
Yeah.
And one of them is when you change your mind, you change the world. And my friend I was with at the time, Glenn, when they said that, he and I turned to each other and looked at each other, and our eyes got big and we both simultaneously said, "That's why we're here." Because we had chosen this show seemingly randomly, but it wasn't, because that's what we needed to hear right then. So I love this idea of power coming from that. And I find it fascinating of how quickly and easily and too often we repress, deny that power. And I think, as you were talking, a new thought hit me, and I love new thoughts, that one of the challenges of empowerment and self-empowerment and personal power is that in order to um, take it on, it requires vulnerability. So I can't. I have to be vulnerable, which means I'm at risk to do that, because that's just kind of the deal. If I want to choose to see something differently, there's a risk in seeing things differently. There's a risk in speaking up. There's a risk in modeling a different way. And to me, I said something this last summer that stuck with me, that, you know, what I've concluded is that great disruption always precedes great outcomes. Well, with great disruption, cause is typically great vulnerability and risk. And that, I think, is one of the blocks we don't think about. I really want that. I really want that. I just don't get it. Or you don't understand. Well, maybe we both don't understand each other is more appropriate. And I've just learned that risk is all around me. And the question is, am I willing to take the risk to get what I say I want? But we don't get to have what we want without risk. The world doesn't. That's something I would say, the world doesn't work that way.
Well, that's a perspective. Well, yeah, I love what you're saying, and what came to mind for me with that is also the concept that all change, even like the best change in the world that you've been waiting for, requires loss, right? Like that loss of old self, that loss of how you saw the world, the loss of the good parts about, even the loss of the bad parts about it. And you're right about that being such a vulnerable place to know that you're going to go into that loss, to know that you're going to be that bit more vulnerable. And on top of it, when you add these layers of, people have all these ideas about power, they have ideas about, what they can and can't do, and how it's been used against them, and how they're going to embrace it or how they can't embrace it. So I love that you use the word vulnerability for that, to kind of summarize this whole package of challenge that we have to take the risk with.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Leah, because I don't know when it was. And I can usually tell time frames because I really began this journey as best I can tell. It's a lifelong journey, but the real intentional journey for me started about 11 years ago. I went to a men's retreat and got my mind blown, and looked in a mirror of truth and told the truth, and it began a deep journey of reflection and working on me. But something that hit me somewhere in this journey is just what you said, that in order for me to, whether we just to be a little different, or to be like this idea of being the truest self that I can possibly attain,
Yeah.
in order to do that, I have to be willing to lose everything and everyone in my life. And and I've shared that with a lot of people, a lot of friends, and it's been interesting of how protective they were of the relationship, because they have said things like very consistently, that would never happen. And I said, I'm not sure it would happen. The question is, am I willing to? Because there's a reality that when we transform, and this is all about transformation, transformation is not a huge thing, it's a huge impact, but it can be the tiniest shift that's a transformation. If I see things one way and I see it a little different, that's a transformation, right? I don't know what the outcome's going to be, but that's a transformation. But if I want to transform, there's a significant risk that things will fall away in my life. And there's always things that I'm going to have to trade off. And this is a tricky topic, because there's a lot of people believe that everything's either or, and I don't believe that. I think there's an abundance mentality here, but there is a reality, I believe. For example, one of the great concepts planned in my head 20 years ago was that every yes is a no. Every time I say yes to something, I'm saying no to something else, even if it's not in the same moment, but it often is. Now, I'm a guy who likes to have his cake and eat it too. Now, the challenge to that is, often the way I've tried to achieve that is just burning every candle, burning not only at the ends, but in the middle, like throwing the candle into a bonfire. So I go, hey, I did it all. Yeah. And what was the cost? I didn't sleep. I didn't
Yeah.
get good rest. So it's an and. It's yes, there are costs, and yes, there's abundance, and it doesn't mean I lose everything. But I've got to be willing to lose situations and people if I really want to change, because the reality is there are some people in my life for my comfort and their comfort. And when it gets uncomfortable, things might change.
Yeah. No, that's so true, and a beautiful way to put that. And I'm curious, because our theme is a little more around leadership today. On a personal level, it's not easy, very hard to say I'm willing to lose everything and I'm willing to make these changes and shift. What do you think that means specifically for a leader who's not only responsible for themselves and the shifts happening around them, but the organization and their team of people that they're trying to help?
Well, right now, just you shifted gears a little bit, because let me be clear what we're talking about now. We're
Yeah.
now talking about some form of institutional or positional leadership,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. It's important to me to differentiate, because we throw leadership in a bucket and we'll say, who's the leader? Well, they have a title. No, that's just the person who has the position of leadership. So let me give you a really quick example of why I don't think they're tremendously different. And it still comes down to, what am I willing to give up?
Yeah.
I was asked about this recently, and I'm doing a panel next week on this topic. Someone wrote a book called Zero Sum Game about the reality of losing in different parts. We can reframe losing, but it's still a loss. So, gosh, 20 over 20. Oh, it's unbelievable. Over 20 years ago now. Wow. Wow. I was faced with a real personal and professional dilemma. I was practicing law at the time. I had my own law firm, and everything about it was successful. Everything that I thought was measurable in the world at the time was a success. The firm was a success. I was successful. I was really good at it, making good money, had balanced out my life. The problem was I came to a realization that I didn't like being a lawyer. I didn't like practicing law. What I loved was the business side, and I wanted to figure out how to do the business side, but not practice law. And I frankly couldn't figure out a way to do it. My partners didn't believe in that possibility. And I made a decision to quit practicing law. And I'd made a decision to leave a firm that I founded. And here's the thing, I knew there was a risk that me leaving would put the firm at risk, which meant people's job. We had probably 20 plus people. It would put the existence of the firm, because unfortunately the firm was still very dependent on me. And in fact, what's interesting is I made the decision to quit and leave about 6 or 7 months before I actually did. I wasn't going to leave anybody hanging, so I did a slow exit. And when I left, the day I made that decision, so the day I made the decision, I was thinking about this the other day. I would have told you that it's probably a 30%, 30 to 35% chance the firm wouldn't survive me leaving. That's a pretty big percentage.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't a 5-10%. 3 months after I announced I was leaving, one of the other three partners left. So I've got now 3 months before I'm leaving, and I would say the odds then went to about 70%. And I made a decision, and people can judge that as being selfish. It was very self-interested because I was unhappy. And I made a decision as a leader in my own life, but also I was the chair of that firm that put people at risk because it was the right thing to do. And that's what this comes down to, because there are always risks of losing out and getting it wrong. But we've got to figure out what's most true for us. What do we value most? What is right for us? What is the right thing to do? And being willing to do that, or choose not to do that, but knowing you made that choice. Those are those leadership moments. And I tend to talk about leadership moments more than leadership. I would just say this: people in positions of leadership often default to what you're talking about is, I couldn't do this because of this risk. Well, right or wrong, I've taken some risks and that firm failed, by the way. The firm, it didn't survive. 2 years later, it was out of business. Everybody got a job somewhere. Their lives were different, but they didn't have the life they had, and they'll never have that experience again. And it was hard. And you could argue what was a smaller group, but I think this is a place that leaders and organizations like to hide behind and say, "Well, I'm doing it for this." Well, but is that really the right reason, or is it just the excuse? There's a real slippery slope in this. That's in my view, and that's what makes leadership challenging. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, first of all, thank you for starting with that, the definition or the differentiating between leadership role and sense of personal leadership. That is a really important piece to acknowledge. And you did answer the question though that I was thinking of, which is how and maybe the better way to ask it is, how does this all fit in when you know that your actions impact other people's lives in a way that they might not have full control over? And so it's really interesting to hear you speak about this concept of, having to do what is right at a very deep level with your own snow globe before, instead of putting it maybe second to others, or having to compromise. And, just thinking too about how successful, to be fair, would that business have been if after those 2 years you were sitting there hating your life and, being miserable. And I'd say that's a much more common victimhood experience that we see, of people who just stay in the same situation, woe be done by the world because they won't change things, just complaining about it. And that doesn't lead to success and happiness either.
Well, and one of the things as you're saying that, Leah, that strikes me is, and I've told people this for, since I started coaching folks 15 years ago or so, that my job is not to make decisions for people, but ultimately to help people make more conscious decisions. And my judgment is not of their decision, but of the consciousness or not that I perceive in that decision. And to get clear on what the drivers of decisions are. And in this context, what comes to mind is how often positional leaders will say, well, I've got to do this for the team. And they won't make a decision. They'll say it's best for the team. But in reality, it's best for them. It's actually best for them, because in that situation, if I had made a decision to stay and then that what I would consider falling on my sword and saying, I'm not happy, but I'm not going to let everybody else down. Is that because I'm the good person and a good leader, or is that because I'm afraid to take the risk myself of going out and doing something different? I don't know the difference, but I don't know the answer, but I can tell you, looking in retrospect, that was part of it. It was in there. So is it really about me? Well, that's the thing. I'm big on, I call it obvious contrarianism, which is, people say, don't make it about you, but it's always about you. And denying that it's about you is naive, and it gets you into trouble. So I own that part that, everything going on right now is about me. Not from a get rid of all of you, but I got to be honest about that. If something's holding me back right now, it's probably more about my internal hesitation, doubts, and fears than about whatever's going on around me. So I encourage people to make it more about them, but to do it in a really authentic and an honest way. You get better answers. You'll get more truer answers doing that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, if there was a thought to summarize this with, this idea of, I honestly think we do overuse the word selfish as well to mean caring about yourself and needing to put yourself first, which I actually think is a really healthy mentality. But the whole concept of you need to take accountability for what you are bringing into your life, for the fact that maybe the things that you want to happen aren't happening because you're not mentally and ready to take that risk and be vulnerable. And that's a big daunting thing for people to hear. Some people hearing it are automatically going to go, no, that can't be true. Protect, can't say that. But at such a deep level, it really is. We're bringing everything into our own lives.
Well, it's interesting because a friend of mine, I haven't seen him in a long time, but his name's Ron Finkelstein, and Ron wrote a book a number of years ago, and he addressed this issue. And he changed the label, and he said he referred to it. It's not selfish; it's intelligent self-interest. And I said, well, that is a nicer word, and I'm okay with it. But it's interesting how we try and have to come up with a nicer word when the reality of many of our challenges we know exist because we're not being selfish enough. Because if you think about one big one in our lives, and I'm sure you see it in the people you work with, the people you coach, certainly, one of our biggest challenges that we all have, I have it, is setting healthy boundaries. Yep. Whatever that means to different people, different scenarios. Some are small issues, some are big issues. Well, that's because I'm not being self-focused enough. Let's call it intelligent self-interest, selfish, self-focused. The work is in here. And I did a video last week, and I talked about this thing of, have you done the work? If you want something different in life, have you done the work? Well, the work is in here. And it's not just reading things. It's what I do with what I read. Did I bring them in here? Did I integrate them? Did I bring them into my psyche, my intelligence? Or is it just, hey, that's a nice thought. You know what? That's really cool, Leah. I'm glad you taught me that lesson. I think it's very cool. Of course, I don't do it ever, but it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Very safe that way, by the way. Discover a lot of cool ideas and do nothing with them.
That we've solved it. We solved the world's problems. Everyone listening,
Yes.
make sure that you go out and do something with all this new knowledge. I absolutely love this. It's always such a pleasure having conversations with you. I can't believe where the time went. If people do have questions about any of this, they want to reach out. We have a link for them, and they can go there, from what I understand, get some more resources.
Yep. Throw that link. They can get connected. They can stalk me on social media. That's one way to do it. Just admit it. We're all stalkers. Even if we're trying to learn, we're still stalking learners. You can sign up for my newsletter, find out more about what I do. And as you gathered from today, I love having these conversations. Someone asked me the other day, what do I like to do when I'm not working? And I said, I love to have authentic, vulnerable conversations, which is let's just talk about stuff because I know I'm going to learn something from every conversation.
Oh, that's a great mentality. I've certainly experienced that to be true, and would encourage anyone listening. We also put your email in there, so please do reach out to Jeff. You will not regret the conversation you have. It will be phenomenal. And just this was absolutely wonderful. You always have a way of helping me see the world just a little differently. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Leah. What fun it was. What fun it was.
Excellent. And thank you to everyone who watched and listened. And we will see you next week. Remember, every thought counts.